Hello friends, I am Sanjay, FIDE instructor. First of all, I would like to thank my guru, my teacher, Mr. Sanjay sir, who taught me chess and all those teachings which I will share with you not only in this video but in thousands of videos in future. So get ready to learn and have fun and enjoy with Dynamic Chess School. Welcome to the world of chess. Like most games, chess has some very basic rules. Once you learn and understand these basics, you will be able to play against anyone. We will learn how to set up the board, how the pieces move. We will learn some special moves like check and checkmates, pawn promotion, castling, en passant, and etc. So let's start with a basic introduction to chess and to make it easier for you to understand the rest. First, we will learn the correct position of a chessboard. So to set up the board correctly, the board should be arranged in such a manner that each player has a light colored square in the lower right hand corner. Just take a look at the empty chessboard on your screen. The highlighted squares are the light squares in the lower right hand corner for each player. So this is the correct position of the chessboard. If we have a dark square in our lower right hand corner, then that will be the wrong position of the chessboard. So make sure that you set up the board correctly. Now we will learn about the board geometry. Chess is played on a board with 64 squares. To make it easier to view the board and move the pieces, the board has alternating light squares and dark squares. As you will see, it is useful to think of the board in terms of its files, ranks, and diagonals. Each column on the chessboard is called a file. For example, as you can see, this is A file, this is B file, this is C file, D, E, F, G, and H. So we have 8 files on the chessboard. Every file on the chessboard is given a letter starting with the letter A on the left side of the board and going all the way to the letter H on the right side of the board. Each rank is assigned a number from 1 to 8. So you can see this is the first rank, then the second rank, the third, the fourth, and you can see that we have 8 ranks on the chessboard. Based on this concept of files and ranks, every square has a name. If we will pair files and ranks, then we can identify the square name. For example, this square is A1. How we can identify that this square is A1? You can see, first look at the file, this is the A file, and look at the rank, this is the first rank. So as you can see, we can simply identify the square name, just like the square name is A1. Pair the file and the rank and you will get the square name. So the A1, then we have the B2, the C3, this is T4, and so on. As you can see, even we have light square like C6, E4, G6. So you can simply identify the square name by pairing the file and the rank. First look at the file and then look at the rank and you will get the square name. Now we will learn about the directions of the chessboard. So in chess we have 3 possible directions. The queen side, this area is from A file to D file and this is called queen side, and the king side. From E file to the H file, this area is called king side. And then we have the center, the third possible direction of the chessboard. So we have 3 possible directions: the queen side, the area from A to D, the king side from E to H, and the center of the board. Now we will learn how to set up the chessboard. Make sure that both players have the light square in their lower right hand corner. The pawns belong to the second row, then the rooks belong to the corners. Next to the rooks we have the knights, then the bishops, the queen on its own color. As you can see, the white queen is on light square and the black queen is on dark square, and finally the kings. As you can see that every piece is facing one another. So there is a symmetry in the position. So this is how we set up the chessboard. Now we will learn how the pieces move. First, I like to start with the easiest pieces to understand, and then moving our way toward the more complicated movements. So let's start with the rook. The rook moves freely in all directions, but only in a straight line. It can move to any number of vacant squares, both vertically and horizontally. It can go up, it can go down, it can go left, it can go right, one move at a time. It can move to any number of vacant square, any vacant square, and wherever it moves, it will move straight. Up, down, left, right. Even it can capture the opponent's material in the same way it moves. Just like this. As you can see, you can take this pawn. One more thing. Rook can't jump over the pieces. For example, there's a pawn here, and let's say if you want to put your rook to this square, you cannot jump over this pawn. First, you can take this pawn and then you can put your rook there after your opponent's move. So you can see, you can capture the opponent's material in the same way it moves. It will move straight. Wherever it moves, it will move in a straight line. So let's talk about the bishop. The bishop moves diagonally in all directions, or in X pattern, just like this. As you can see, it moves diagonally. It is making an X pattern. Bishops can move over any number of free squares in a diagonal direction. It can capture an opponent's piece standing in their way. As you can see on the screen, it captures in the same way it moves. It will capture the opponent's material diagonally. Now let's talk about the queen. The queen is considered the most powerful piece in terms of its ability to move around the board. It can move like a rook and the bishop. Each player has one queen at the beginning of the game, but we will see that it's possible to get more queens by pawn promotion. Queen can move in any number of vacant squares, vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Even she captures pieces on her way by moving to their squares. Take a look at the screen. She can capture the pieces diagonally like a bishop and straight like a rook, because she has the power of rook and a bishop. The knight moves like a capital L. Just take a look at the position on your screen. The knight from this position can move to any of the squares highlighted in red. Let's see how. It makes the L shape. Like this, it can move to this square, even to this. It can move to the c5, the g5, then the c3, the g3, and it can also move to this d2 square in the L shape and the f2. Let's see how it moves. It can move here, it can move here, it can move to all these highlighted squares like this. So it moves in the L shape, like this or like this. The cool thing about knight is that it is the only piece that can jump over other pieces. Just take a look at the position on your screen. We have a knight on e4, and you can see we can make a move and we can jump over the black's pieces. We can play this move. You can see that our knight jumped over the rook and the bishop, but this is possible. We can jump over the opponent's pieces. That's the cool thing about the knight. Even we can jump over our own pieces, like we can jump over our pawn on e3. Even we can move our knight there. Even in this position, we can capture some material, like we can capture this pawn on c5. Even we can capture this pawn on f6. So that's how the knight moves. Now we will learn about the pawns. The pawns are the smallest unit of the chessboard. They may seem small and unimportant, but they are often very useful, and don't forget that once they reach the last rank, they will become a queen. A pawn is the only piece that moves in one direction and captures in a completely different direction. At the beginning of the game, all the white pawns are placed on the second rank and the black ones on the 7th. From this starting point, the pawns can, as desired, advance 1 or 2 squares. Each pawn from its initial position can move either 1 square forward or 2 squares forward. After its first move, the pawn can only move 1 square forward. For example, black played this move. Now you can only move it 1 square forward. You cannot move this pawn to this square. It's illegal. So once you make a pawn move, no matter which pawn you move, you can only move it one step forward. And one more interesting thing about the pawns is that they always move forward. Pawns can't move backwards. So that's how the pawn moves. A pawn captures by moving diagonally forward one square to the left or right. For example, let's say white played this, black played this. Now we can capture this pawn like this. Let's say black played this move. Now we can actually take this pawn as well. So you can see the pawn captures by moving diagonally forward one square to the left or right. For example, let's say if you take this, even black can take back like this. Or let's say if black played this move, you can even take this pawn and black can recapture your pawn like this. So that's how the pawn captures. Now we will learn about the special moves, the pawn promotion and under promotion. If a pawn succeeds in reaching the back rank of the opponent, which means the last rank or the 8th rank in the opponent's area, it is promoted to any desired piece of one's own side except for the king. So let's see, we can promote a queen, a rook, a bishop and a knight. Even we can promote more queens on the board. Yes, it's interesting. So theoretically, one player could have 9 queens on the board, which means the original one and 8 promoted ones. The further a pawn advances, the more powerful it becomes. Same for your opponent. Even if his pawn reaches the 2nd rank and if it moves to the last rank or your 1st rank, he can promote it a queen or he can promote it any desired piece, which means the under promotion like the rook, bishop, knight. So that's all about the pawn promotion and under promotion. Now we will learn about the special move en passant. Just take a look at the position on the screen. We have a pawn on the 5th rank. If this pawn moves one square forward, we can capture it since pawns capture one square diagonally, so we can simply take the pawn on d6. But if that same pawn, instead of going one square, moves it 2 squares forward, trying to avoid this pawn from capturing it, well then we have en passant rule, which says that we can still have the option of capturing the black pawn as it had only moved one square forward. So we can simply take the pawn on d6. One more important thing to note is that this is a special rule involving the pawns only and no other pieces involved. The en passant capture must be performed on the turn immediately, just after your opponent played the move. If the player does not capture en passant on that turn, they no longer can do it later. So basically you can do en passant with white pieces when your pawns reaches the 5th rank. Just take a look at the example on the screen. Let's say white played this e4, black played c5, white played e5, and now let's say black played the pawn d5. As you can see, we have a pawn on e5 on the 5th rank, and if black plays the pawn move from its initial position to the 5th rank, like 2 steps forward, we can simply do en passant. And if black plays this move like f5, we can simply take en passant. So that's how you do en passant. If your pawn as white reaches the 5th rank and if your opponent plays the pawn move from its initial position 2 steps forward, you can simply take the pawn like this. Now let's take a look at how to do en passant with black pieces. So with black pieces, you can do en passant if your pawn reaches the 4th rank. So when white plays a pawn move from its initial position 2 steps forward, you can simply do en passant. And same here, if he plays a move like c4, you can do en passant. So that's all about en passant. Now we will learn about the most important piece in chess, the king. The king is not as powerful as the queen, but it is truly the most important piece because you lose the game once your king gets checkmated. The king can only move one square at a time. It can move vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. So we can move here, the vertical squares, forward and backward. We can move to the horizontal, the side square, and the diagonal squares like this. so it can move one square at a time. He can attack any piece except for the other king and queen. So this is the very interesting thing about the king. Even it can capture the opponent's material in the same way, like it moves. It moves one square at a time. Now we will learn about the special and the most important moves in chess, the checks and checkmates. Whenever there is a threat or attack against the king, it's called check. So the term check simply refers to the king being attacked. For example, in this position, black played rook to d7. And now you can see the rook is threatened the king. So the king is in check. There are three ways to defend against it. First, you can capture the piece who is giving check. So you can capture the checking piece. The second is, you can block the check with any piece. Like you can block the check with a bishop. As you can see, now the king is not in check. You simply block it via the bishop. Even you can block it with the rook in this position. So you can see you are defending against a check. And the third way is, you can simply move the king. Like you can move the king here or to any safe square. It can move to any safe square. So you can get out of check. One more important thing to know is that in professional chess, we don't say check. Let your opponent see the check. If he did not see it, then it will be illegal move, and once he make two illegal moves, he will lose the game. Now let's learn about the goal of the game, checkmate. When the king is in check, and if there is no way to defend against it, then it's called checkmate. For example, in this position, white played bishop to c2, and the bishop is giving a check to the black's king, and black has no way to defend against this check. Because black cannot capture the checking piece, even black has no way to block the check, and there is no square for the king. All the squares are protected. So it's called checkmate. The king is mated. So once you checkmate your opponent's king, you win the game. So now we will learn about the special move, castling. The king and the rook can take part in a very special move. The only chess move that involves moving two pieces at the same time. This move, known as castling, helps bring the king to a safer square and bring the rook towards the center. Let's learn how to castle. The white king can castle on either side of the board. It can castle queen side or it can castle king side. To castle, follow these steps. Move the king two squares towards the rook from e1 to g1 or from e1 to c1 if you want to castle queen side. Move the rook to the square immediately on the other side of the king. I also call this jumping square of the king. So let's see. If you want to castle king side, the king will jump over this square. So the king will jump one square and the rook will occupy the jumping square of the king. So that's how we castle king side. And same on the other side. The king will jump this square. So king will jump one square and the rook will occupy the jumping square of the king. So that's how we castle. Technically, castling is the king move. So be sure to move the king first in a tournament. If you touch the rook first, you will be required to move just the rook because of the touch and move rule. So now you know how to castle, but there are some important rules to know that when you can castle or when the castling is illegal. So the first rule, you can only do this one time in a game. You can't castle 2-3 times. The second rule, it must be the king's first move and it must be that rook's first move. So make sure that both the king and rook have not previously moved. Just take a look at the position. Let's say in this position white played rook to d1 and black played this move f6, and now after rook a1, let's say black plays g5, and if you want to castle queen side, it's illegal because your rook was previously moved. So you can't castle queen side. But because if your king side rook is not moved, you can castle king side. So make sure that the king and rook have not previously moved. The third rule, all the squares between the king and rook must be vacant. For example, in this position, you can see it's logical that in order to castle all the squares must be vacant between the king and rook. The fourth rule, you can't castle during check. Even you can't castle when there is a check on the jumping square of the king or landing square of the king. Like if black, let's say white plays any move like f3, if black gives a check, you can see your king is under check, and now castling during check is illegal. You can't castle during check. Even you can't castle if there is a check on the jumping square of the king. Let's say this bishop is controlling this jumping square of the black's king. So black king can't castle king side because the f8 square is already under control by the bishop. So there's a check on the jumping square of the king. So the castling on the king side, it's illegal for black. Even castling on the queen side is illegal because there's a check on the landing square of the king. Okay, so these are the rules of castling. Now you know all the basic rules of chess. Let me summarize everything. We learn how to set up the board, how the pieces move like king, queen, rooks, bishops, knights and pawns. We learn about some special moves like check, checkmates, pawn promotion, castling, en passant and etc. Let us know in the comment section if you have any questions about the rules of chess. Now you are ready to play and enjoy the great game of chess. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching and I shall see you in my next video. Bye.